Mark Vientos just solidifying himself as a Mets playoff hero at this moment.
Yeah, Mark Vientos joined Gary Carter as the only players in Mets history with at least 10 total bases in a postseason game.
That's the motto this year. The mantra this year is we will always put up a fight. We're never going to be out of this game. And that's got to be terrifying to be a team to be on the other side of that. That no matter what you do to the Mets, they're always going to give everything and there's always a chance. Like the Mets are never out of any game.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, the last 5 days have, if you didn't realize that before the last 5 days, now we know, and now all of Major League Baseball knows that until the 27th out is recorded, this Mets team is alive.
Hey, thanks for meeting us at the Apple. I'm Vito Calisi. That's Jonathan Barron. You can follow me on Twitter at Vito F. Calisi. He's at JMB9191. And we wish we were recording this podcast under different circumstances after a fired up 2-0 Mets lead heading back to Citi Field. But we're coming back to Citi Field at the same place everybody was saying you just got to come back split. You got to come back to the ballpark 1-1 and be in a position that you can clinch in front of your hometown team. But, this isn't like our Game 2 recap from the Wild Card Series, John, where there weren't too many positives to talk about. Because although the Mets let this one slip away, a ton of good things did happen today. One of those obviously being Mark Vientos just solidifying himself as a Mets playoff hero at this moment.
Yeah, Mark Vientos joined Gary Carter as the only players in Mets history with at least 10 total bases in a postseason game. Look, today was crazy. You guys know exactly how Game 2 of this series went down, back and forth, both teams having big moments. At times, it looked like the Mets were on their way to a 2-0 series lead, which was a very exciting feeling. But we know that this is not going to be an easy series. It's a really good Phillies team across the way that the Mets are competing with. And this might be one of the best series that we see in the entirety of the postseason here. Dare I say, perhaps the winner of this series comes out of the National League. But there were a lot of positives. Of course, a disappointing loss. But I did a lot of thinking after the game was over. And I know that we were texting with Brendan. And we were talking about some of the tougher playoff losses in Mets history. And this, in a way, feels a little bit like the way that Game 6 of the 99 LCS went, and the fact that the Mets had a dramatic home run hit in the top of the ninth inning to tie the game, only to eventually lose in heartbreaking walk-off fashion in the bottom of the next inning. Now, here's the big difference. That night, the Mets season ended at Turner Field. On this night, the Mets are going to travel up the turnpike, take a day off, work out at Citi Field on Monday, get back to Citi Field for the first time in 2 weeks, and then they're going to go out there in front of a savage, and I mean savage, crowd at Citi Field on Tuesday night with a chance to take a commanding 2-1 series lead. So things are a lot better than some of those other playoff losses we've experienced where you were feeling really down in the dumps, let's say, after just a really tough loss. That's not the thing here, so I want Mets fans to keep that in mind. The Mets have it all in front of them.
It's like you said, John, this is only Game 3 we're getting into at Citi Field. And for the first time in 2 weeks, Mets players will be sleeping in their own bed. They'll be going to their home ballpark, and Mets fans will finally get to root for the Mets at home. And, we've hinted at it on the podcast. We got a lot of really cool stuff planned for you guys who are going to be making your way out to Citi Field and stuff that, if you're watching on TV, you'll notice as well. But it's just unfortunate that this game went the way it did because there were so many highs in this game. I mean, Pete Alonso going yard, Brandon Nimmo taking back the lead off of a home run. Also, Sevy was dominant until, you make a mistake against Bryce Harper, you're going to pay. And that's all it comes down to. One bad pitch changed the dynamic of the game. But outside of that, Sevy was just mowing everybody down in his path.
Yeah, Sevy was great. He really was. Third time through was always challenging. It's a big debate in baseball. It's why you see a lot of managers go and pull their starting pitcher, what some people deem as a little bit early in a game. Mendy stuck with Severino. He even stuck with him after the Nick Castellanos home run. Sevy got out of the 6th inning. And then, of course, you know what happens in the 7th inning. Jose Butto comes in. He hits JT Realmuto. And it was at that point where I feel like the formula was kind of thrown off a little bit, where Mendy realized he had to go to his ace in the hole, and that, of course, being Edwin Diaz. But this also kind of goes back to Game 1, where the Mets bullpenned that game, and they used a lot of high leverage arms. A guy like Reed Garrett, he pitched 2 innings in game one, so he was unavailable for game two. David Peterson pitched 3 innings. He was unavailable for game two. So Jose Butto was a guy that Carlos Mendoza turned to. Jose Butto was unable to get through that 7th inning without much traffic. And then, of course, Edwin Diaz comes in, puts out the fire. But in the 8th inning, the Phillies lineup gets to him. And it starts with, of course, Bryce Harper, who draws a walk, and Nick Castellanos, who takes a high fastball the other way, and a big hit by Bryson Stott, who you knew Stott was going to break out eventually. He's a guy who's had success against Edwin Diaz, has had a ton of big hits in his major league career. So, look, like I said, I was really thinking. So I was in New Jersey today. I had a long car ride home. Really did a lot of thinking about this game and moving forward in game three and what it all means. Let's not forget that the Philadelphia Phillies were in this exact spot each of the last 2 years when they knocked out the Atlanta Braves, the best team in the National League in both of those years, 2022 and 2023. The Phillies went to Atlanta. They split. If you remember the way that game two in Atlanta ended last year, that was the Michael Harris catch at the wall where I think he doubled up. I think it was Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto was the base runner. Or no, excuse me. I think Realmuto hit the ball. And for a second, it looked like the Phillies were about to tie the game in the 9th inning. And then the game ended with a crazy defensive play just like that. And the Braves, you thought were taking a bunch of momentum back with them up to Philadelphia, wasn't the case. So the Mets stole home field advantage from the Phillies by taking game one. And they could have very well won game two. You know, the Phillies had a 1-0 lead for a while in game one, but their bats went silent. And I feel like this Mets pitching rotation, this pitching staff, can keep this Phillies lineup at bay, especially if you can control 1, 2, 3, and 4. On Sunday, the Mets were unable to do that, and now we're tied up at 1, coming back to Citi Field.
It's a weird feeling because, I don't even know how to explain it. I don't feel like I felt after game two in Milwaukee. After game two in Milwaukee, I felt down in the dumps because it was another game that they let slip away from them, obviously. But today was such a high energy game, and they came back twice. I mean, that game in Milwaukee we saw last week, game two, they gave up the lead and then they never put back up a fight until obviously game three where they won. But like today, they gave up some runs, and then what happens right away? Brandon Nimmo goes back out there and he gets the boys back on board. And like in the bottom of the 9th, like you said, John, we went through a lot of relievers. It was going to be really hard to get to the extra innings at that point. But you got to give these guys credit for going into Philadelphia in what is such a hostile environment. They were booing their own players 3 innings into the game, that the Mets were able to respond back, and they will always. That's the motto this year. The mantra this year is we will always put up a fight. We're never going to be out of this game. And that's got to be terrifying to be a team to be on the other side of that. That no matter what you do to the Mets, they're always going to give everything, and there's always a chance. Like the Mets are never out of any game.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, the last 5 days have, if you didn't realize that before the last 5 days, now we know, and now all of Major League Baseball knows that until the 27th out is recorded, this Mets team is alive. And, we talked after game one about the fact that the Mets did all the damage in their 8th-inning rally without homering. And I said the homers are probably going to start coming. And they did. The Mets hit 4 home runs in this game. Now, unfortunately, they lost the game, and that's a bummer. When you hit 4 home runs in a game, you think you're going to win that game. Brandon Nimmo and Pete Alonso hit solo home runs. Of course, Mark Vientos hit a couple of 2-run home runs. But the Mets started to get those power bats going. And in game 3, it's going to be Aaron Nola on the mound for the Phillies. And the last time Nola faced the Mets, he gave up a couple of big home runs, a pair of 3-run homers in the same inning. And Aaron Nola, over the last 2 seasons, Vito, is tied for the most home runs allowed in Major League Baseball. Now, we've seen Nola have some great outings at Citi Field. He, of course, tied Tom Seaver's record for most consecutive strikeouts in a single game. He's had plenty of other great outings at Citi Field. But the Mets getting the power bats going home to this raucous Citi Field crowd. We know the Mets love to hit home runs at Citi Field, especially when there's certain celebrations going on, and you guys are in for a big surprise, a big treat. There's a lot of exciting stuff that you guys are going to love on Tuesday. It's going to be an absolute madhouse. I know I keep saying that, but I keep coming back to how excited I am for everyone to be together for those opening intros and just, the team on field video and all these incredible moments, because this is the first time we're hosting a National League Division Series game at Citi Field since 2015. It's crazy. And these games are going to feel so much bigger because they are so much bigger than the wild card series that we hosted against the Padres a couple years ago. And of course, the Mets were in that position because they had a disappointing end to the season and they let the division slip away. No one wanted to play that wild card round. So while it was cool and yes, it's October, yada, 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 this is the return of true playoff baseball to Citi Field for the first time in so long. It's going to be incredible. And the Mets have a chance to really do some damage against Aaron Nola, who has been susceptible to that damage.
And like I said to start the show off, the Mets still have the opportunity to clinch at home in those two games. And if you go back to that series we played against the Phillies in late September, the last homestand of the year, Phillies came in for 4 games. They needed to win 2 of those games in order to clinch the division and celebrate on our field. And you know what the Mets did? The Mets held them to 1 single game, and those guys did not get to celebrate until they left here. So you got to like our chances right now. You got to know the boys are fired up to come back home. You remember Brandon Nimmo that week? He was jumping on the mic after every single game saying the fans got to come out. We need you guys. Like, that's what gets us going. If that's what gets the Mets going, I cannot wait to see this place tonight as you're listening to this. And I'm so excited to not have to listen to it.
Tomorrow night. They're going to be
Oh,
listening.
yeah, it's still tomorrow night. There's still an off day. Yeah, that's crazy. I've been used to the Mets playing every single day, so I'm just not used to it yet, John. But one of the things I'm looking the most forward to is not having to listen to a national broadcast. I'm excited to be in the ballpark and just watch the game.
You're really down on this broadcast. You're really down on the broadcast.
Look, I over-exaggerated on Twitter when I said that it was completely silent, but this is what I meant. Adam Amin, I think, did a good job of calling the home runs. I did not want to take any credit away from him. His call on Nimmo's second home run was great. My problem was the rest of the booth kind of went dead flat anytime the Mets did something. Adam Amin did a good job, but then everybody went silent. Also, I've never heard a broadcast just talk about how badly they would like to see one of the teams in that situation win. I barely heard them talk about the Mets winning that game. All I heard them say was that the Phillies need to come back. Oh, the Phillies are right there waiting. If you're the Phillies, you got to come back. Always talking about every problem the Mets had. Anytime Sevy had a pitch on the edge, it was called like, oh, that's a borderline strike. Anytime I felt like anytime the Phillies had a pitch that was on the line, you know what I heard? Oh, the Mets stole that one. So I'm just saying it was some suspect broadcasting. I guess I'm doubling down instead of trying to like ease the tension a little. But I will say Adam Amin did have some good calls in that game. I just wasn't the biggest fan. And I'm excited to be at Citi Field where you'll hear either Howie in some sections of the ballpark, or I guess you will also hear the national broadcast in some sections of the ballpark.
Well, I have a theory, and my theory is that when you're in the stadium and a place is loud or quiet and you're in the booth, it's easy to get, I don't want to say sucked into, but caught up in the wave of all that. So when there's a huge moment and you're a broadcaster, and especially on a national broadcast, and you're impartial, right? Like, of course, your RSN, your home broadcasters, they're rooting and they're broadcasting to a fan base. So that's fine. They could be a little bit less impartial. But for Adam Amin, especially on that Bryson Stott triple, right? Like, that's a crazy moment. Or Castellanos and Harper going back to back. We know it was Bedlam at Citizens Bank. As much as we hate to say it, that place was going crazy. We're going to match that, probably do better than that here Tuesday and Wednesday. But as a broadcaster, yeah, like, you're going to match that energy because you have to paint the picture of what's going on in the stadium. So I got no qualms with Adam Amin.
Wow, apologist.
I'm not an apologist. Come on, I'm not an apologist.
It sounds like you're an apologist right now.
I'm not an apologist. I get it. I do get it.
I do think we get, look, I will admit this. We get wrapped up in, we hear Gary, Keith, and Ron, or Howie and Keith and Pat for 162 games a year, and you get very used to like hearing the Mets side of things. So when you're listening to a game and you're hearing the other side, it is jarring. And I would say that our broadcasters are more down the line than most. Obviously, they skew Mets and they want to see the Mets succeed, but I think ours are a little more honest and a little more hard on both sides.
Sure.
But yeah, it sounds like you, you know what? I think you just have some, maybe it's because you have some friendships that you just want to like keep, that you want to just keep tight and not ruffle any feathers.
That you are calling, that you're referring to and saying I have friendships with, are listening to this and are going to judge me. But there's another element of this. Like, I know Joe Buck has said that everyone claims to Joe Buck, like, you hate my team. Like, it's a joke of Joe Buck's when he was doing baseball games. Like, Joe Buck hates the Yankees. Joe Buck hates the Red Sox. Whenever they'd play a big postseason series against each other, he would hear from both fan bases, stop hating my team. Joe Buck hates the Mets. Joe Buck hates the Phillies. So I just feel like when you're a national broadcaster, especially doing games that are so important in October, whenever the other team is a big moment and you have that inflection in your voice, you get excited. The other side's going to get a little peeved by that, but that's because they're already upset and they're looking to be peeved about something because something bad just happened to their team. Kind of like what we experienced on Sunday. I mean, damn, dude, I that was really that was a wild ball game. That really, really was. And
it's been a week of wild ball games.
What's most frustrating is that it feels like the Mets have been on the winning outcome side of so many of these back and forth crazy games that I feel like we've kind of gotten a little bit spoiled when it comes to the way that these games have turned out. And on this day, we didn't have the outcome in our favor. When the game on Monday in Atlanta, or the big one, which was Game 3 in Milwaukee. I mean, I was talking to a buddy after the game, and he was like, "This wasn't even the worst loss this week. Like the Mets lose in Milwaukee, that was also in the 8th inning, nursing a 1-run lead, but losing that game pushed the Mets to the brink of elimination, and they were staying in Milwaukee the next day. They weren't coming home to play a couple of games at Citi Field. Like we are guaranteed games 3 and 4 at Citi Field, and we know that playing on the road is no bother for the Mets. So that really put into perspective in my mind. Like, okay, you know what? That's right. This sucked, but they're going to bounce back. I also want to shout out Missy, aka I think it's Hey Squidward on Twitter, or Host Squidward on Twitter, Heaux. I guess it's French. I don't know the origins of that Twitter handle, but she'll be at the ballpark on Wednesday night for Game 4. So I know she's low key happy that the Mets didn't win this game. Although I know she would have been happy if the Mets did win this game. But I know she also wanted a Game 4, and I was telling her, hey, now you're gonna see a clinch on Wednesday. But she had great positive vibes, just like, nah, we got this. Like it's not going to be that easy, but like, yeah, this is going to be all good. And hearing that also from a great Mets fan, it also kind of just cheered me up because when I say I was down to the dumps, I mean I got in the car and I drove up from central New Jersey and I sat in 2.5 hours of traffic after having what felt like my heart ripped out until I finally kind of came to my senses and realized, okay, it was a loss, but it's tied at 1. We're coming home. We're going to be all right. Just like we were after Game 2 in Milwaukee, Vito. Hey, I got this for you right here. Ready?
Yeah.
Clip this off, only if it turns out to be right. Mets in 4, baby.
No, John, I said it before. I felt so much worse after Game 2 than I feel after this game. Game 2, like I sat in my bed and I looked up at the ceiling for 20 minutes. I only looked up at my ceiling for like 5 minutes tonight. But it's like you said, and there's other factors too. Not only are they coming home, but they also actually get an off day. If you remember that Game 2 before Game 3, they had just played the doubleheader on Monday. They went straight to Milwaukee, played Tuesday and Wednesday, and then they had to win that game on Thursday. So we're seeing a very different situation right now where we're actually able to get things back together, get some pitchers in line. Also, we've spent 2 days just going after every single one of the high leverage members of the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen. Even with the day off, that's a lot of pitches that these guys have thrown. And 1 day off, if you're pitching 3 out of 4 days, that's still a lot on an arm, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this bullpen it's been taxed. I also wonder how Carlos Mendoza and the Mets are going to utilize their pitching moving forward here. Does David Peterson make a start, or does he stay a weapon in the bullpen? Is it Jose Quintana that's starting Game 4 for the Mets, or might Jose Quintana become a guy who comes in a big spot out of the bullpen? Because having Kodai Senga back on the roster now, it changes everything. We don't know what Kodai Senga's capabilities are for a possible Game 5. Could he go 4 innings? Could he go 5 innings? Could he possibly be used again for an inning or 2? That could possibly be in a big spot out of the bullpen. It's this time of the year where you just go against the grain. It's not about what you've done or what you're used to doing. It's about how can I get this big out in this big situation? And I think back to the way that Davey Martinez managed the Nationals back in 2019. That was a Nationals team that going into the postseason, the bullpen was its Achilles heel. And they figured out a way to minimize the amount of innings that guys that they simply didn't trust were going to throw. And that was by kind of cycling through the starting pitchers. And on the throw day, essentially, that guy, instead of doing a side session, he'd be coming into the game, throwing a couple innings out of the bullpen, getting big high leverage outs late in games. And the Nationals found a way to just continue to utilize the guys that they trusted. And they did that all the way to a World Series title. That was also, when you think about it, if I could not imagine being a Washington Nationals fan during that run. You have a game, a wild card game, 1 game wild card game at home. You're losing the entire way to Milwaukee. Brent Suter is shutting you down. Craig Counsell takes him out, goes to Josh Hader. You have that incredible moment late in the game where Trent Grisham lets the ball bounce by him. You grab, snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Then you play a 5-game series in LA that goes to extra innings, and Howie Kendrick hits a grand slam after you guys are down 2-0. You get 2 home runs late. Another incredible series. And then the NLCS, that was kind of easy. They swept the Cardinals. And then you go to the World Series where the road team won every single game. And that was another team, by the way. You said this, and I love this comparison. Your Gerardo Parra to Jose Iglesias comparison. Another team that got off to a rough start, the Nationals and the Mets. A lot of similarities between those two teams. So what I'm trying to say is buckle up, because this could be a crazy ride that's not easy at all. And we might all lose a couple of years off our lives for it, but it could be a lot of fun.
And you know what's really fun? Seeing the Mets go after Matt Strahm 2 days in a row. And when Matt Strahm comes back out there at Citi Field, hopefully to some fireflies in a really intense situation, we're going to see the Mets get to him yet again. But no, man, honestly, these podcasts we do, I'm not saying we should do episodes every game during the regular season, but I think these episodes are really good for my mental health, because it's nice to just sit down and have a conversation about the game and recollect and be like, look, everything's okay. We've been getting to their bullpen. Even Zach Wheeler, who we weren't touching for the first few innings, towards the end of that, Zach Wheeler was losing his control. We were taking good pitches. I feel really good, man. I feel like tomorrow's going to be a good day because we're going to have a fun day at Citi Field at work getting ready for the postseason. But Wednesday, Tuesday, those are going to be great days at work, and those are going to be some great podcasts. I can feel it.
Those are going to be special nights. They are. So, everyone that's going to be there, get there early, be loud. Like I said, we got some surprise secret weapons that are going to help get this place going. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be so cool. There's nothing like Citi Field in the postseason. The circular shape of the ballpark, I feel like it's probably got to be one of the toughest places for an opposing player to come in during the postseason with, at Shea, there were really no fans in the outfield, right? Like, you had the bleachers, but in center and right field, there were no fans. At Citi Field, that's not the case. And we know that Mets fans are just rabid, waiting to greet their heroes, the New York Mets, and their foes, the villains, the Philadelphia Phillies. We saw the Phillies fans set a little bit of a bar in games 1 and 2. That bar is about to be blown out of the water.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys at Citi Field. You can reach out to us on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Vito F. Khaleesi. John is at JMB9191. It's going to be a fun 2 days at Citi Field, and these are going to be some more games that you're never going to forget. The only place to get in on those memories is at the ballpark. It's going to be a zoo. It's going to be an electric factory. It's going to be every single euphemism I could possibly think of to describe what max energy in an intense situation is. And we're going to have a party on Wednesday and Tuesday. So only one place to be in. It's in Flushing, Queens, guys.
Yeah, Vito. And I'm glad we got to do this. I know we were kind of just, there was no document this time. Vito yells at me for not following the doc. There was no doc this time. We really just kind of let it all out, got our emotions out there. And that's what it's all about, right? Being able to talk your feelings through after a tough loss and regroup for what's going to be an exciting couple days, as Vito said. So thanks, Vito, for helping me out. Make me feel better.
And let's see some Mark Vientos home runs at Citi Field in the playoffs. We saw some in Philly today, but I want to see Mark Vientos go yard at Citi Field. I want to see everybody go yard at Citi Field, obviously, but I want to see that Mark Vientos playoff moment that I know John has been talking about since the day he debuted and since the days of him being a prospect, that when people didn't believe in him, and we won't say any names, John Barron was always saying the one guy I'll never worry about is Mark Vientos.
Just wait till that Francisco Alvarez home run hits. It's going to be nice.
Ooh. All right, guys. We'll see you here right back after game 3. Let's go, Mets.